yeah, about that background, the standard work combination sheet. So in my first Kaizen, and you got to understand, my background was, engineering and new product development, and so it was nothing related to manufacturing, and uh, and I knew nothing about industrial engineering. My background was mechanical engineering and materials engineering. So in my first Shingijutsu Kaizen, I got assigned the task of doing the standard work combination sheet for the work. And I'll tell you, I was totally lost. I did not understand it at all. What I produced was a joke, I needed I needed a lot of help just to produce the joke of my rendition of the standard work combination sheet. And but and you got to understand too. So in this Kaizen, so here's Bob Emiliani, the business unit manager, PhD, and so forth, can't do this seemingly simple thing. And so
Yes.
people made fun of me and so forth, and the team, some operators and so forth, and we had a good laugh about it. It was no big deal. We had good teamwork, good camaraderie, and so forth. But it was, kind of funny that the guy with the most degrees on the team couldn't figure out how to do a standard work combination sheet. And so it was, it was a great experience overall, including that, fumble of the poorly done standard work combination sheet. But all of it was extremely eye-opening. Tell you, to understand the work for the first time.
Kaizen
So.
makes us humble.
Yes, it does make us humble. But,
It's a very
so
changing experience.
with practice, of course, you get much better at doing these standard work combination sheet. Can get a little more complicated as workers go back and forth to this, one station to another and then back to the other, and with the splits of cycle times and so forth. But anyway, um, so I think we should begin, I suppose. So welcome to round two of the Bob and Bruno conversations here. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about Toyota style Kaizen. And when I say Toyota style Kaizen, it's basically, Toyota has different ways of doing Kaizen. And we're going to talk about one of the main styles and what Shingijutsu has taught in the past and continues to teach today. So we're going to talk about three topics. Why did Lean World forget about Kaizen? Chihiro Nakao's nose. If you're unfamiliar with Chihiro Nakao, he was one of Taiichi Ohno's disciples. He's now 84 years old. He's still out there teaching and training and consulting and coaching. Amazingly enough, he's been doing this now for, he's industrial engineer with 60 years worth of experience. And then the third topic is Kaizen and respect for humanity. So we'll have a general conversation about that. Bruno will head up the first, excuse me, I'll head up the first topic of why did Lean forget about Kaizen. Bruno will head up the second topic, Chihiro Nakao's nose, and then we'll both talk about Kaizen and respect for humanity. And throughout, we invite you to, raise your hand or interrupt if you have comments or questions. We'd love to hear it. So we want to try to make this, engage everyone in the conversation, not just us speaking. So with that, let me, Bruno, if you'd like to do an introduction.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody. So, how Bob has said, we are going through round two. Uh, all the three rounds are very, very important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it because it will be waste. But I believe you guys will like to pay very, very much attention to today's topics about Kaizen. I like very much uh, a post that Bob made a few years ago, making an analogy that if Toyota production system was a car, Kaizen would be basically the engine,
Mm.
showing very, very, very clearly how important it is. So I hope you guys enjoy it. We are enjoying very much, and I guess we can begin.
Okay, did you want to say anything in Portuguese for folks who
Sim, sim.
from Brazil? Yeah, just quick, quick,
Bom, para
quick
quem vai
intro.
acompanhar a gente aqui, sejam bem-vindos à nossa sessão número 2. Amanhã já vai estar disponível para vocês lá a versão com a legenda e tudo mais lá no nosso canal do YouTube. Hoje o tema é o Kaizen ao estilo Toyota, que foi aí o elemento, aí não vou dizer que o único elemento que ficou de fora, mas talvez o mais importante que acabou ficando de fora do Lean e fica de fora até hoje, no sentido geral, assim, de importância. E os três encontros são muito importantes, caso contrário a gente não faria três, né? Senão seria desperdício. Mas eu acho que vocês vão tirar muito proveito prático, se vocês aproveitarem bem a sessão de hoje. Então eu diria que talvez das três ela é aquela mais importante dentre todas as importantes. Então aproveitem bastante, espero que vocês gostem. Ok, let's go.
Okay. So, why did Lean forget about Kaizen? Well, when Jim Womack and Dan Jones were involved in writing some of the books about Toyota Production System back in the would have been early 90s, roughly time frame. Among the various things they did was they at least Jim Womack did. I don't know about Dan Jones, but I assume so as well. But Jim Womack, shadowed Chihiro Nakao in leading Kaizen activity, and apparently they weren't so impressed by that activity, which is of course core to the creation of Toyota Production System, because the trial and error method that Ono refers to in his writings is Kaizen. So if we look at the writing of Jim Womack and Dan Jones, and in the first book, The Machine That Changed the World, another co-author was Dan Roost. They spoke a little bit about Kaizen and the machine that changed the world, but in the book, Lean Thinking, there was much more talk about Kaizen. And this being the most important thing, however, was not really subsequently emphasized. And it is odd that the lean world, as represented by Jim Womack, Dan Jones, the Lean Enterprise Institute, the Lean Enterprise Academy, did not, emphasize its importance, given that it is the method of trial and error problem solving that created TPS. So for some reason, they were not very impressed by Nakao-san and his facilitation of Kaizen and the Kaizen, one or more Kaizens that they witnessed. Usually Mr. Nakao will lead 3 to 5 Kaizen simultaneously. And in fact, in some of their writings, and particularly newsletters and on Lean Enterprise Institute website in the past, and we're going back some years now, criticizing Shingijutsu and Nakao for Kaizen. So they viewed Kaizen apparently very narrowly as point Kaizen. You do a Kaizen in an area and improve that area, and that's the end of it. But they did not seem to understand that Ono was driving Kaizen forward to achieve flow, to achieve just in time, to achieve, along with Jidoka, to achieve this reduction in lead time from the customer, the order to cash cycle from the customer's order to payment. And Ono-san was driving Kaizen to make these improvements to achieve what he called the river system flow without spending money, instead using human creativity and ingenuity instead of spending money. So I don't know if apparently they were really not aware of this connection of the purpose of Kaizen and what it was trying to achieve and what Ono was pushing people to go do. So of course, the founders and promoters of Lean had no hands-on experience, or skill with Kaizen, and instead brought forward various of the so-called, what we now call Lean tools, that were used within the context of Kaizen, but then taken out of that context and, of course, brought into the marketplace as just a bunch of Lean tools. And I suppose the thought was that they had that this would generate, greater interest in, improving one's business and lead to changes in management thinking and the management system. However, that really didn't work out that way. What we see is these Lean tools applied within the framework of classical management and having the effect basically of making a classical management business more more efficient. So it's kind of backfired. It really didn't have the desired outcome. And sure, there's some cases where there's some success and so forth, but overall, it doesn't seem to have had the desired effect. Lean along the way became less concerned about standard work combination sheets, Yamazumi charts, basically understanding the work. And if you go to the, Lean Enterprise Institute and the Lean Enterprise Academy website, they talk about, understanding the work and so forth, and they make some efforts to do that. But this is really what's fundamental to the development of Toyota Production System, is to understand the work and then to creatively solve problems related to the goal of just-in-time material, continuous material and information flow, and so forth. And they talk about this stuff from time to time, but again, it doesn't have the level of emphasis that you would have expected it to have. And it certainly had more of this kind of emphasis back in the early days, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So anyway, Kaizen, why do we want to do that? We want to break the status quo. We want to take something bad and completely rethink what's going on in that process. Lean tools do not typically do that. There's, of course, some exceptions and so forth. But apparently, somehow they thought that companies would be perhaps not so interested in Kaizen, and it would be better to sell these lean tools. Now, they may have had some sound basis for making that judgment, because they would have had conversations with business leaders and so forth in the early days. For example, when the Lean Enterprise Institute was formed in 1997, prior to that and immediately subsequent to that, CEOs may have shown very little interest in Kaizen, and we know that to be true, that the CEOs are not interested in participating in Kaizen, and CEOs are not interested in breaking the status quo. So, they've never explained why they did what they did, the rationale for it, and so forth. So we can only guess at these things, but these are perhaps plausible explanations. So that leaves us in a world where, within Lean world, people really don't understand Kaizen, and they don't practice it, and there isn't the spirit of innovation and creativity and ingenuity that goes with it, the teamwork and so on. And it's just a shame to see this not an essential part of Lean world. So that's the way it is, and we have to accept that, and instead look to Toyota as our inspiration for understanding how to break the status quo. So Bruno, in order to break the status quo, we have to make sure people don't just do the things that everybody else does. Oh, I also wanted to show you a couple of slides here. Let me do that first before we move on. Yeah, hold on a second. Let me share this. There it is. Okay, so why is it so important that we get in? Can you see this slide of Henry Gantt here? Yeah. Why is it so important that we do a Kaizen? So a long time ago, 1910, Henry Gantt was a famous industrial engineer. He was part of Frederick Taylor's crew, and he was excellent industrial engineer. And he said the usual way of doing a thing is always the wrong way. And when I showed this slide to people, I asked them to really take this to heart and internalize it, because the usual way we do things is the wrong way. The way we're doing today's Zoom is probably the wrong way too, and we have to find a better way, and so on. But we think of the wrong way as being high cost, low quality, long lead time, unsafe, and so forth. But there's also things like it's just incredibly resource intensive, environmentally harmful, humanly harmful, creates a lot of stress and conflict, and so on. And so bringing this phrase into our thinking and making it ever present help us drive towards the notion that there's always much better ways to doing something. But in the Kaizen sense, it's not just sort of incrementally improving some way you're doing something. It is finding a breakthrough to completely change how you do things. You may have read in the book Kaizen Forever, a process would take 360 seconds, and Mr. Nakao would say do it in 36 seconds. So remove the zero from 360. And these are the kind of huge, gains that Kaizen is driving people to go achieve, and they can do it. When you give people that challenge to uh, do it in 36 seconds rather than 360, they find a way. Whereas most businesses are saying, do it 10% better. What does 10% better get you? It gets you to 330 seconds or 324 seconds or something. It's just not doing anything. So this is how this is the key to improvement. And this doesn't come up in the lean literature. Just take the zero off and do it in 36 seconds. So many years ago, I was just surfing the web, is the old term, just looking around for stuff related to Toyota and Kaizen, and I came across a training slide, a training slide that was in Spanish, and it was a discussion about the Toyota way, and I reproduced the slide here with some minor modifications in red and green. But it was a discussion slide which asked the question, which scenario is most identifiable with the Toyota way? And when I saw this slide, I just said, oh, this is the entire secret revealed. I mean, in one slide, this is the whole story. Scenario X, as you can see, there is one answer to that problem. 3 + 4 is equal to 7. And in scenario Y, we have the number 7, which represents some kind of goal, such as just in time, or going from 360 seconds to 36 seconds. How do you achieve that goal? Well, the two blank boxes tell you that there's infinite ways to achieve the goal, right? Just like there's infinite ways to get to the number 7 with the two blank boxes. So in scenario X, this is what other companies do. It's just there's one best way of doing it. It's the status quo. You keep doing it the way it's always been done. Do it the way just the boss tells you to go do it. Do it the way the company is established. You're a new employee. You come into this type of work. It's being done a certain way. You just do it that way and keep doing it that way. In scenario Y, you establish some type of goal or target and then say, try it and see. Try it out. Try storm. Experiment, see what happens, keep trying, etc. And this is how Toyota went from, in 28 years, from a batch and queue producer to just in time, from 1945 or so when Ono started at Toyota Motor Corporation to 1973, when the TPS manual was created inside Toyota, and enough of a codification of TPS to put it down in writing. So this is that's a big deal, what you see in this slide. And scenario Y is what we should be striving for. The other thing is, you may have seen me post this a while ago on LinkedIn, but this was some Mr. Iwata was the co-founder of Shingijutsu. Shingijutsu was created at Mr. Ono's request to teach people, companies around the world, TPS. And Ono did this or requested this. He also created something called the New Production System, or NPS Institute in Japan, because around the time his book, Toyota Production System, was published in 1978, he was comfortable to be able to share all the secrets because Toyota was far enough ahead of the competition that they could do that. So anyway, the story that's told to me here by the person who provided these images was this person was having a difficult time understanding what they were trying to achieve in Kaizen, and Mr. Iwata, usually being a stern person and scolding people, he actually did what was quite out of character, which is what the person said, quote, it was really out of character for him to sit down and explain it this way. So he must have had a special interest or affection for this person to do this. But if you just look at the top, Kaizen is not the same thing as continuous improvement. it's relentless improvement towards the ideal state, flow being the ideal state. And we confuse Kaizen and continuous improvement. I've done it too. We all do it and so forth. But there is a difference in understanding in the Toyota way of what Kaizen means and then what everybody else understands as continuous improvement. And Kaizen must directly impact performance. It must positively impact key business measures. We're not doing this Kaizen just for the fun of it. We're part of a business that may not survive if we're not diligent about making big improvements. Everyone participates in Kaizen, not just the people from one department. We're breaking down walls between departments by having cross-functional teams participate in Kaizen, and we're improving communication to eliminate delays and rework. We're destroying preconceived notions by engaging in Kaizen, because when you tell somebody, take 360 seconds, now do it in 36 seconds, you've got to destroy your preconceptions about how you do this thing. You've got to rethink it completely. Overthrow the status quo. The status quo in business is no good. And whenever you've made a Kaizen improvement, pretty soon it becomes, as Henry Gantz said, the usual way of doing a thing, and it's wrong. So not long after not long after you got to 36 seconds, it becomes the usual way of doing a thing, and you've got to think about how to do it in 15 seconds or something like that. You have to be connected to the reality of the situation, reality based on facts, not preconceptions or ideology. Autonomous activities, meaning not getting permission from Kaizen, not showing the finance people a spreadsheet that says the return on investment of Kaizen and so forth. Just do it. Try it. You got an idea, try it out immediately. There's, of course, no end to this thing. Build a corporate culture that will always continue Kaizen so you evolve as times change. Tomorrow's different than today, so you have to evolve. And no delay. Don't be complacent. So on. And then on the right side, some other details about what you're trying to do as far as achieving just in time. So what does Kaizen teach? It teaches a lot of things. The Henjin crew, Henjin means oddball. So if you're Kaizen person, you're kind of a strange person, an oddball person, and so forth. It teaches you how to see a lot of things that you didn't see before, not just waste. It teaches you to be curious. It teaches you to be creative and use your ingenuity. It teaches you how to think in ways that you never thought about before or never thought you could think that way. It teaches you to be persistent. It teaches you to be, to have this spirit and desire to discover and learn. You learn a personal discipline to do some investigation, not just jump to conclusions as to why certain problems exist. You start to, through your learning, evolve and grow, and then you share that with others. You teach others. If you look at the words that clock around this symbol with the Kaizen calligraphy, full-fledged Kaizen person gets angry at their half-hearted measures. And it is true. If you are a full-fledged Kaizen person, you'll look at some of your improvements and go, oh, that's no good. That's just terrible. I made a big, big mistake in doing that. Once you begin, you are unstoppable. Also true. You have an affinity for change and you can't stand the complacency and the status quo. Relentless identification of abnormalities and immediate rectification. Yeah, let's correct that now, not put it on a list, a schedule, a bunch of people to look at it in 2 weeks from now. So these are the kind of things that Kaizen teaches. We'll stop there and let me end the share here. We'll turn this over to Bruno. So yes, tell us about Mr. Nakao's nose.
Thank you, Bob. So I would like to share my screen with you guys so I can show a few things that I prepared. So let me see here. So Bob has given us in the first encounter a few foundational stones about the need for the production system, the need for Kaizen, And something that's very, very prominent is that the main goal of Toyota during their trial and error process was to reduce costs. And this is very important for us to keep in mind when we are talking about Kaizen, because reducing costs is today almost like an offense. No? Lean folks have started to banish the idea of reducing costs because it sounds like relentless, sounds like something we should avoid because people get worried about their jobs, but in fact they're worried about their jobs not because of the term cost reduction, but because of how management reacts when it needs to reduce costs. I believe you guys are seeing my screen right now. So taking a little bit of advantage from what Bob said in our first meeting, the basic challenge is for us to keep up with the free market, where the prices are given by our supply and demand relationships. At least most of it. Sometimes folks can tamper with the market. CEOs has a lot CEOs has a lot of strategies, very anti-competitive strategies to make their companies go forward and have a profit. But if you want to keep up with the free market in an honest way and working together, getting good outcomes for everybody involved, we need to reduce costs. Prices are given, our margins will be very much determined by how much we can control and do better with our costs. This scheme you guys are seeing here on my screen is from Toyota Kaizen Methods, a book written by Isao Kato and Art Smalley. A very, very, very good book. It's very expensive here in Brazil, but it's very, very worth it. And this diagram shows us that the basic challenge of every business is how to increase production or how to increase productivity. In this case, this example is very, very related to manufacturing, as we are using the word production, but you can take here production as the same thing as keeping up with the demands, keeping up with the changes that demands brings us from time to time. And we can say that we have basically two options when we think about approaches to deal with that. We have a quantity-based approach where we need to increase production. So we go and add more workers, more machines or equipment, and maybe more working hours. So we raise the quantity of our resources in order to try to increase production. But our main objective here is to reduce costs, and more resources equals to more cost. The second alternative is quality-based approach. And we can say we have two options inside quality-based approach. The first one being we work harder. So we put more effort in our work. We sacrifice our energy, put our life and our machines at risk. So we are indeed creating Murray. So we don't want to create Murray. We don't want to be people overloaded, have people overloaded, or machines overloaded with work in an unsustainable way that will give us so much problem at a certain time. And the second option side, quality-based approach, is what we do in Kaizen. We observe the work, we look at it in a critical way with the power of our thinking, and we try to find creative ways to eliminate waste, eliminate something that we see as waste in that work, and make it easier. This is a very important word here. Sometimes we do Kaizen and call some things Kaizen, but in fact that makes the work harder for one of the sides involved in this. So we may have made the work easier for our company. Let's say by adopting just in time, we will receive just a certain amount of product, certain amount of material from our suppliers, but we don't give any support to suppliers so they can follow our schedule. We just pass the burden to them, and that's not respect for people. Okay, and this has the advantage of not just increasing productivity, not just increasing production, but also increasing productivity, as you don't add resources. So you are getting more output by reorganizing the work without adding resources. This brings us to Nakao Sensei knows. And I was thinking about it through the last few days, and I got to the conclusion that is a very, very good framework so we can ensure that we are doing Kaizen aligned with the main objective, that is cost reduction. So Nakao Sensei knows is basically a list of things that we must not do, must not add, must not ask for, must find a way to take out from our ideas of what to do when we are trying to improve work. So if you are going to do Kaizen, you have a situation where you need to boost the performance of your process. It is better, and is really a true Kaizen, a very, very true Kaizen, if you don't throw money at the problem, so you can reuse resources. Every company has that little room where stuff gets piled up, old stuff and other stuff that guys are not using on their days. Don't add people, no more space, no cranes, no conveyors, and so on, Very, very much things that we always kind of consider as a Kaizen, as an improvement. So we'll find more space, I'll add people, I will use drawers. So this is very common when people are trying to organize stuff to stop the messy workplaces. So let's add a drawer, let's put on some cabinet, and a cabinet with doors so we can keep things without dirty, and they pretty much add obstacles to the work that tempers our efficiency. So this list is not static. It can vary according to the type of work, but this covers very, very much some important things. And there are some nice little stuff here. Like I would like to give special attention to no catalog engineer. A catalog engineer is the kind of engineer that just know how to buy ready solutions, ready-made solutions. So he chooses from a catalog, a new machine, a new software, and we don't want to do this because we need to customize stuff, right-size stuff if we want to have a lower cost to our production process. And another one I like very much is the no sacred cows, in the sense that we must connecting with the status quo idea. We must not have things that we can challenge, we can question. And there is a very, very nice phrase about that in one of Shinjutsu materials that says, sacred cows gives us the best hamburgers. So it's usually that thing we must not change, that are the things we would get the best result by changing. And this goes on par with what Taishi Ono says in his most popular book. That is, improving efficiency makes sense only when it's tied to cost reduction. So is a practical way to show us a very nice framework that won't let us forget about this thing. So sometimes folks will raise efficiency, but that will come bundled with a cost. Okay, and this is very nice when we start to think about the concept of waste, because in some literatures, Toyota official literatures, very old ones, like Kanban just in time at Toyota, that is a compilation of the training materials Toyota used to expand the idea of its systems to its suppliers and other folks, that they don't call waste as a list of isolated activities like we call, like overproduction, inventory, and etc. They call waste arising from overproduction, wasting arising from processing, wasting arising for having too much inventory. So it's a very different point of view. That is the activity of overproducing creates for us the need to have more resources than we should have if we believe that there is another way to do the work. So this excess resources, these extra resources we add to the system in order to compensate overproduction. We will need more folks to keep up with material handling, and we will use machines beyond the needed hours. We will spend more materials than we would spend if we get a just-in-time approach. So all these things creates the need for extra resources, extra time, extra machines, extra working hours, and it's a very curious and broader way of looking to the concept of waste. And this brings us also to the implications that basically to eliminate waste, we must believe that there are better ways to do the work. There are better ways to organize our resources. And I brought you guys two examples. One of the concept of moonshine. Moonshine is a concept created by Nakao Sensei that is inspired in the prohibition law you had at the United States at a certain time, where the alcoholic beverages, liquor in general, was being controlled by the law. So folks in the need to find how to bypass this law, they started producing artisanally their own alcoholic beverages, giving birth to the concept of moonshine, something that you do to bypass some challenge, to bypass some restriction, in a very ingenious way, and using resources you already have. This is an example of moonshine, of a very simple and ingenious device, and I took that from the True North Thinking LinkedIn page from our friend Matt Elson, a very TPS guy that I like very much. And this is a little machine, a very ugly one, that folks build it based on the need to split the tape where they have this label. So let me show you guys again. And inside of that, we basically have this beautiful thing here. We have a few pieces of cardboard. We have a lot of tape here, and we have a little blade, a little piece of blade here that does the splitting of this stripe of label. This is ugly by traditional and classical management standards. This is outrageous if we think about how they prefer beautiful solutions. Of course, this kind of solution wouldn't be very good if we think about maybe food industry or pharmaceutical industry. We would have the need to be more rigorous about our moonshining, because we have some regulations, we have food safety, and we have a lot of other stuff. So our experimentation will be a little bit more refined. But this is a very good example of in how all industries we can have very good ideas and we can reuse resources. And this is a very, very good example that I've seen a few years ago and I basically can't forget about. In contrast, we have here a very, very great example of Western bad Kaizen. That is kind of an overkill when we think about the issue that was trying to be resolved here. And we have a very, very, very good example of apparent efficiency. So we have something that looks efficient, that looks beautiful, that looks modern, actual, but in fact, it's raising costs. I won't say anything about it. I'll show you guys the video because I believe it's very straightforward. Let me show you guys again. This is the definition of overkill. And when I share this on my network, folks came to defend the approach, but they were using examples of how this approach would be useful in another situation. And obviously, we must have a lot of other situations where this approach would be okay, would be nice. But thinking about this very specific example, where we have a little shadow board here, we are totally overkilling it. It's more expensive, it will require more maintenance, we'll have software problems, we'll have a screen to protect, maybe this will start to malfunction sometime, and we'll have to rework the software, and all other stuff you guys know that comes together bundled with too much too much of a modern approach to things. In this case, just the shadow board here with the contour of the tools would be way more than the necessary. Okay, I believe that's what I would like to show you guys. So I want you to keep in mind that Kaizen is a way of cost reduction. It's the main way of cost reduction, but it's a smart cost reduction. It's not a cost cutting measure. That's very different from cost reduction. Usually folks think about cost cutting. During cost cutting, they end cutting important stuff for the work to keep flowing. And cost reduction is a very different approach when you think about Kaizen, because it talks about cutting the extra things we need because of the way we organize our work. Okay, Bob.
Bruno, I think leave that up there. I think Mr. Nakao would create a no based upon that. The no would be something like no doubling of the visuals.
Yes, no fancy screens.
That's what's happened there. You double the visual. You have a visual control for the shadow board, and then you have another visual. So you've doubled the visual for what purpose? Just to be fancy, but as Bruno said, adds to cost and so forth. Bruno, can you go up to the Nakao nose slides?
Okay. And it's very scary how people liked this video
on
LinkedIn.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah, so getting back to what Bruno said earlier about this, the allergy, the allergy to cost reduction in lean world, because people think it's tied to layoffs and so forth. And, um, it's unfortunate that that allergy has taken place and remains in place because it doesn't serve, um, it doesn't make the understanding any better. It makes it worse. And what's happening here with, Mr. Nakao's nose and this approach to cost reduction is not just cost reduction, as Bruno said, but it's making the work easier. It's shortening the order to cash cycle lead time. It's making the work safer. So when people hear cost reduction, they're not understanding the work is easier, the work is safer, customer gets what they want when they want it, and the way they want it, and so forth. They just hear cost reduction as a negative thing. And this is where the Western interpretation of cost reduction comes in, gets, the people in lean world adopt this, or not adopt, but they have this way of thinking that's a classical management way of thinking about cost reduction. Instead, the lean people should be clarifying to everybody whenever they get the chance that cost reduction in progressive management is good because it makes things more safe and more easy, and the customers are happier, and so on and so on. But they don't do that. They just instead adopt this negative view of cost reduction. And so just looking at the nose there, one of the things that Mr. Nakao is doing with placing all these restrictions, these constraints, is it's forcing people to think. And it is forcing people to be creative, because normally we don't think, we jump to conclusions about problems. And normally we don't consider ourselves to be very creative, individually or in teams. And so these restrictions, these constraints, force people to use their creativity, to think, to use their ingenuity. And what he's saying is that humans have vast capabilities to be creative and innovative, but they don't get the opportunity to do that when they just say, let's look in a catalog and purchase this a piece of equipment to solve our problem, or let's call up some software people to buy a piece of software to solve our problem. And so you don't develop people if you don't give them these kinds of constraints associated with problem solving. These constraints also force people to simplify things, to reduce the complexity, to make it easier. You want people to spend ideas instead of spending money. I want to zero in on this word force, because a lot of times people don't do what you know you want them to do, so you have to force them to do it. Now, we can force people in different ways, and some ways are very negative, of course, but there's also ways we can force people by reducing the number of options they have, and it forces them in a you know it, it aligns with the word force, but it is not pushing people in a negative way. The other thing about force is, Mr. Ono had difficulty getting people to understand what he was driving towards. And so he scolded people, and those scoldings were essentially, forcing people to think differently. And so I think, have the attitude that if you scold somebody or if you force people to do things, you're disrespecting people. But you can do this in certain ways that respects people and develops people, and the people will thank whoever scolded them and so forth for doing that. And that's what has happened over the years with Mr. Ono's disciples. So I don't think it's a bad thing to force people to do things if you force them in the right way.
There are some studies, very nice studies, that shows that a certain amount of restrictions is very, very good for creativity. And if we stop to think about it, we can see some examples in our daily life and throughout history that we progress. We have progress on things based on restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find a way of doing something, but we have a restriction. We can use this technology. We can do it this way. So when everything is an option, we don't have the need to be creative. So a certain amount of restrictions is good for everybody, and makes easier, if you start to think, makes easier to have some good ideas, because if everything's out in the open, you can choose between everything. It becomes harder to choose. It becomes really harder to choose. But if we put some restrictions, we can push creatively way forward than if we have all the options available to us.
Yes. So we have to think. I mean, imagine an artist, an artist, somebody who's developing their creative skills in, let's say, visual arts, painting or something. And so they're going to study the artwork of a lot of other artists, and they'll probably say, I don't want to. I may copy that artwork initially to learn certain skills and so forth. But by studying different artists, they will learn these kinds of restrictions. Somebody's already done that. Somebody's already done that. Somebody's already done that. So I want to do something different. So I want to take in those constraints as part of my development, but then I want to break free of those constraints and do my own thing. So this is, a really important aspect of Kaizen that you just don't see typically in Lean world. They don't talk about these constraints as being the key to unlocking, developing people, to unlocking your thinking, to using your ingenuity. And people like to create. If you look up in Wikipedia, hobbies, the word hobbies, or what are hobbies, some phrase like that, you will find almost every hobby on this long page of hobbies. There's outdoor hobbies, indoor hobbies, these kind of hobbies, that kind of hobbies, etc. They all involve making something. People like to make things. And so what Mr. Nakao is driving at also with these no's is to get people to get their hands dirty and make things like what Bruno showed the example of cutting the labels, splitting the labels in two. People have a great sense of satisfaction when they've actually made something. And all of our hobbies outside of work involve making something. And I think that's, I mean, even if your hobby is to read books, you're making imagination. You know, if your hobby is to shop, then you're making a collection of clothes. You're making something. And this is why we get a lot of satisfaction with our hobbies that we don't get at work, because in our hobbies at home, we're making things. But at work, it doesn't seem like we're making things. We're just a little piece in a larger process that has a lot of problems and is more frustrating and makes us unhappy and gives us a lot of stress and so forth. So we make things. I worked with a guy once on a major program many years ago, and he had one whole room, a pretty substantial size room devoted to his trains. People who have a hobby of trains, and they make the city, the train, and they have the city and the trees and the people and the cars and so forth. And it was beautiful, and this was his way of feeling like he is accomplishing something in life because work was so difficult and felt like nothing was getting accomplished. You work 30 years and you retire, and what did you do? You know? But with Kaizen, you can work 30 years and retire and say, oh, we made these wonderful Poka yoke devices. We figured out a new way to do a certain kind of tooling for a press machine that, took defects to zero. You've made things, you've created things. And a big piece of that is making your own equipment. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but with Toyota style Kaizen, don't always go out and buy equipment. Nobody, go back to Mr. Nakao's nose there. Nobody ever asked me what this M machines. See that no M machines? Can you highlight that? Do you know what that stands for? No M machines?
I was going to ask you today. Life.
Yeah, okay. So some of it's a little cryptic, vines, roots, and so forth. But anyway, no M machines. So it's Mr. Nakao noticed long ago a very curious thing that most of the machine tool makers in Japan have the name M. Whatever the name of the company is, the name M.
It's a big
It's the name M. And so no M machines, meaning he's trying to say if you need to a machine to do something, um, first of all, it should be right sized to the size of the part and within the flow of the process and so forth. So it's probably not a big machine. Depends what you're doing. It could be, but maybe not. And then these machines could be bought used, and you can modify it to suit your needs and so forth. So you don't need to buy these big expensive M machines. And these M machines have, of course, when you go to buy these big machines, they want to sell you all this add-ons to the machines. And then the machines have a service contract. So you're trying to do cost reduction, yet you buy these big, Japanese manufacturers with the name M machines with all the add-ons, and you're not reducing costs when you do that. And so you should, as part of Kaizen, modify used equipment that you have in somewhere in your company, or that you just buy on the market for much less than a new machine, and modify it, or you make your own machine. And then you develop skills and capability internally within your business to be able to create customized machinery that nobody else has that's specific to the job. And I remember when I was a purchasing manager after my time as a manufacturing business unit manager, there were some companies that I visited that did just that. They designed machinery specific to making a certain kind of part. And because they did it in-house, and it was beautiful machinery, not beautiful in the sense of looks pretty, but beautiful in the sense of the functionality. And that produced that would made them able to produce the part at lower cost than anyone else, hence lower price than anyone else. They never lost that business to other people as a result, because nobody could compete on the price. So this machine that they built, which, maybe cost 10, 15, $20,000, they was in use for, which is not a lot of money for the machine I'm thinking of. That machine, it was in use for 20 years, you know, and they service it themselves. And so this is how you are able to, produce things at lower cost than the competition. And you put this stuff on wheels. So when the tax person comes around, it's not there. So there's all kinds of tricks that in lean world nobody wants to learn about. And I could go on forever and telling you these tricks on cost reduction. And by the way, when you build your own equipment, you expense it. It's like buying paper towels. It's an expense. It's not capitalized, right? So in many businesses, when you buy a piece of equipment, it's capitalized. And first of all, it's very expensive. Second of all, you pay interest on the loan that you had for the equipment. And it's just you pay taxes on it, but if it's expense, you don't pay taxes on it. I mean, great stuff never comes up in lean world, never comes up in lean. And so the Toyota way of thinking, when Mr. Ono forced people to get them to think, has these wide-ranging benefits that people just instead want to do an A3 report or something like that. It's just crazy. Absolutely crazy.
VSMs are prettier.
That's why people say, oh, TPS is common sense. If it was, everybody would be doing it. Fact is, very few do it. Classical management is common sense. Mr. Cho once said TPS is common sense applied in a practical manner. But it was on LinkedIn. So, David Martin wrote this, and Mr. Ono told him many years ago that TPS is common sense applied in a practical manner. I believe that's the exact quote. But he said it took him years and years to understand that. Because it's not just one of the things is when you see a flow line functioning, people who don't know about production, when they see that, they say, yeah, that looks right. Why would you do it any other way? Frank Woolard had this observation in the 1920s. When people saw his flow line, they'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Why would you do it any other way? But the reality is, everybody does it, batch and queue. And when they see batch and queue, they don't really see what's wrong with it. But when they see flow, that makes sense. And they think it's always like that, and it's not. So you go through a career here with this kind of creativity in your job. First of all, your job is a lot more interesting and fun, right? And you enjoy coming to work. And if your job is fun and interesting, you enjoy coming to work. And if you, instead of being offended by the scoldings, you think about what you've been scolded about and what it means and how you can improve, then you don't have type of stress that you get with a typical company being blamed for a problem. It's part of your development.
Maybe we can say, Bob, that Kaizen is on par with the human nature. We all have a natural need to create things, to take care of things, to use our minds to generate something. And I've read somewhere, I can't remember right now, that Ford production line took away humanity from work.
Yes.
Humanity that we had in manual work, in craftsmanship, and then Toyota put it back, put it back with Kaizen.
That might have been an article I wrote years ago about bringing
Yes, yes.
craftsmanship back to back. Kaizen
Yes.
brings craftsmanship back to work. Yeah, if you think about it, for the historic history, the humanity, humans, for how many millions of years of doing craft work, right? And then in the late 1700s, machinery and industrial revolution comes along, and it's only in the last 200 years or so, 250 years, that we are lost our craftsmanship. And this is another reason why we like to do hobbies at home. So Kaizen brings craftsmanship back into work. When I was first in Kaizen, it blew me away because we had people with great, the operators with lots of work experience and the engineers with, graduate from the best schools and so forth. And we were producing stuff in the worst possible way, in the aerospace industry. And that first Kaizen, when we went through it, the operator couldn't believe the setup time was, a fraction of what he had been doing it for years. And, nobody could believe this stuff. And it just blew me away. And then, Nakao's facilitating Kaizen and the results from Kaizen just blow me away. I cannot understand how, Womack and Jones were not just totally blown away by Kaizen, Toyota Kaizen, because it is fundamental. This is the reading, writing, and arithmetic of how you get competitive in industry, how you stay competitive, how you develop people, and so on and on and on and on and on. So I don't know, maybe someday they'll explain why they thought this was no big deal, not worth really thinking about too much, not worth getting involved with. But it is fundamental. As other people, do you have comments? Let's hear from other people. Comments, questions? There's lots of tricks on tooling, by the way. If you're in a company that does stampings and things like that, welding parts together and so forth, there's all kinds of tricks to use clamps that you order from a catalog, but you expense them. And instead of having, $10,000 durable tooling fixture and so forth, there's all kinds of inexpensive ways to do things. If you challenge people to do it, say, figure out a way to weld this part to the blueprint spec without this expensive tooling. And they'll figure it out. And it's got to be quick and easy and require no special skill. You don't need somebody who can lift 300 pounds in weights to be able to do this, that somebody who's, small and skinny can do it. So it's just amazing.
People are kind of used to work means to be doing effort and not something effortless. So
Yes.
we kind of associate work with suffering and other stuff and not making things easier. So we can show that we are people thinks that
Yeah.
when something is easy, we are lazy and other stuff. We try to
Historically,
hide behind effort.
historically, work is drudgery. Because if you think back, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, work was manual labor. It was very difficult. You didn't have a long lifespan and so on and so on. And that thinking from hundreds of years ago or even 100 years ago is still with us today. The work being drudgery, dirty, difficult drudgery. Other comments? Please join in. Who has questions? What do you got to say? So there's some.
Share some experiences.
Yeah, share
Love.
some experiences.
There's no
Can
right
I-
or wrong here when we are changing experiences.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, Sergio.
Yes, yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the content. I was wondering, for people who are not used to this type of Kaizen, the original one, the TPS Kaizen, when they start to do these Kaizens, they might feel sometimes, I remember, Bobby, you said in your presentation saying that you have to focus on things that will have an impact on business performance. But when you are just at the beginning of this journey of learning how to do Kaizen, what's your practical advice in terms of should we start with something more simple, in order to make people starting thinking in this way and get used to this way of doing things and then evolve to more complex ones? Or how to start for people who are not, is in point zero, to go to start working in the way that you explained it, you and Bruno explained it?
So recently I posted some translations of Taiichi Ohno, some books that featured Taiichi Ohno, and one of the things he said there, and was apparent from some other writings, but he liked to think in reverse. He liked to do the opposite of what everybody else does. And he noticed how, in America, we do things, from right to left, and they do things from left to right. There's a lot of the book in Japan is opposite a Western book in terms of the page numbers and so forth. And so he noticed all these opposite things, and he said very clearly in one of these books, in his own words, that I wanted to do things opposite the way other people do things. So most people will start out Kaizen with something simple. You should instead start out with the hardest thing, the worst, your worst bottlenecks, the biggest problems, the thing that take the longest time. It takes 120 minutes to do it in, half that time or less, and this to really change how the process is done. So a lot of this is opposite way of thinking, instead of spend money, spend ideas. And instead of being satisfied that it takes 360 seconds, do the opposite. Say that's no good. Do it in 36 seconds. So opposite way of thinking.
Maybe you are worried too about how much stress your team can take when solving a hard problem. But that's kind of related with how big is the amount of support leadership is giving them. One thing is to throw hard things at people and say, okay, do it yourself, and the results are for you to blame. Or throwing the hard things at people and give support, encourage people to think differently, and say, okay, honest mistakes are okay, it's part of the process, and creating a good stress, not a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing
ahead,
wrong with a leader who doesn't even know much about Kaizen, but to say to people, okay, sales are going up for this product we make, and so please find a way to reduce the time it takes to make this product by 50%. Do that within the next 2 weeks, within the next week. Now the leader, of course, has to say, you figure it out. And I'm not going to second guess you and say that's, whatever you did is no good. I mean, if it achieves the goal of meets the blueprint or whatever the requirements are and is done in half the time, then what's the problem? There should be no problem. But usually there is, because there's some metric or something that contradicts, what the improvement is in a classically managed business.
Okay. Just to share an experience, why I have asked this question is because what I noted in practice, I came from the construction sector, and I noted that people are not used to think in this way. And when they find something that's very complex, they feel a bit overwhelmed at the beginning in terms of what should I do now? And I believe that that's when it comes the creativity that you mentioned, that they find themselves in some situation that they've never been before, because they have to find some way to get through that. But at the same time, so that's why, in terms of practical advice for people that are starting this learning curve, if they should start from this point, or if this could be at some point demotivate them because they feel that they are not able to get through this complex process at the beginning. So that was not sure if I made myself.
Yeah, no, you're clear. Yeah, you're clear. Mr. Nakao says you have to put yourself under dire circumstances to, make the change. So either a sensei puts you under dire circumstances and say no new machines, no this, no that, etc., or you put yourself under those dire circumstances. I mean, there's nothing magical about it. You can get you saw the no's there, and you can think of others, and you can run your Kaizen with those no's in mind. and put yourself in this is your dire circumstance. No money, no new machines, no this, no that. That's your dire circumstances. And then you have to think differently. And one of the things I always tell people is try to make this fun. This isn't, I want you you tell people, I want you to have fun with this. We have a big challenge here. We need to find a way to do this in less time. We're not going to lay you off or fire you, whatever, et cetera. You got to say that stuff. Then and it's got to be true. And have some fun with this. At home, what you don't see is people making these analogies. Like at home, you have these hobbies, you love to make things. Okay, well, figure out how to make this thing at work. Bring that idea of hobbies. Mr. Nakao would refer to something, he'd combine two words, shumilation, I believe it was. It's in the book Kaizen Forever, but it's basically making a hobby at work, making a hobby of experimentation, of simulation, turning people into giving them an interest and curiosity to make experiments and simulations of better ways of doing things at work. They call it shumilation, not simulation, shumi, because shumi I thought meant, that's in the book anyway, I forgot what it is. But this is the slide Bruno was talking about earlier. Kaizen is the engine of improvement that most organizations take out. They say, forget about the Kaizen. Let's do these lean tools instead.
Let's push the car.
Yeah, let's take the engine out and expect to have transformation.
Yes.
Let's take the engine out and expect huge cost savings. I mean, this is why the Kaizen office gets fired after 2 or 3 years. Because management took the engine out. Sometimes the Kaizen office takes the engine out itself, The lean office takes the Kaizen engine out. And so you have a lot of activity in the company, but no results. You wonder why that is. There's no people development. It's just people busy doing charts, creating boards. The reason why, it's funny, I showed something on LinkedIn the other day showing how ridiculous the Gemba walk is. There's a big complex procedure for the Gemba walk. Bruno, what did it say? It said Mr. Ono's Gemba walk was, how was it?
It was something about he goes to Gamba and say, I want this done in half of time, and goes away, something like that.
Yeah, I mean the Ono Gemba walk was much simpler. It was four steps, I think. It was
go and think.
Where the hell?
Bob Kalin wants to share something with us.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Happy to see you again, Bob, and happy to be here with everybody. I have been delving deep into process optimizations and operations management in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. However, I have been struggling to imagine in my head one specific thing coming from my experience. So my experience is that usually, at least the way things happen here in Bulgaria, where I am, everybody is always rushed. They're always overworked. Usually the client wants everything being done yesterday. The management wants it being done the previous week. And what I do not understand is if a company decides to go along the Kaizen path, the Toyota way of doing things, how do they actually find the time and the resources for all the trainings, for all the experimentation, and for everything when they are falling behind, and they are falling behind with weeks? My experience comes from software development and IT. I'm really interested in figuring out how Toyota's Kaizen can be applied to these kind of services because it's a total mess there. People swear in agile and they just do not understand that this is a project management methodology, not an operations management methodology. So it's a huge mess there. I'm really interested in that. But always, everywhere you go, in every company, you see the same thing. It's always firefighting, and they're always falling behind, which is the biggest constraint is time. So how do you tackle this in the initial stages of applying Kaizen, especially having in mind what you, Bob, said a few minutes ago, that you should start with something really hard and really difficult and something really big, as opposed to what Bruno said, starting small.
Well, if management is hiring Shingijutsu, then they sanction, these big changes, at least to some degree, right? If you don't have that kind of sanction, that they're willing to let people experiment to make a big improvement in the process. Because typically in Kaizen, what happens is, let's say you do the traditional 5-day Kaizen, you spend the previous Thursday, Friday documenting the process. There's the team that does this, 5 or 6 people. They document the process. Monday, they start to make improvements and so forth. They have difficulties. Usually Tuesday, Wednesday is kind of a struggle. Then by Thursday or Friday, they've made some experiments and figured out what works and make a big improvement. And so you have to either do this, have the management sanction to go do this, because what happens is usually in the like Tuesday, Wednesday, of course, production for that area is going to go way down because you have to move equipment and make some changes and so forth. But then after you've made those changes, production is 5 times, 3 times what it was before. So you catch up immediately. But what we're all dealing with is, in Frederick Taylor's day, people were concerned about the regimentation that the machine required. The machine ran and regimented people to the machinery. What you're describing instead is a regimentation to management, to managers. The managers are forcing people into a certain regimentation, and that's the problem. And when management runs the business like that, then they just want to do what Bruno showed earlier, which is make people work harder. It's the quantity approach to improvement. What was it, Bruno? You work harder, produce more. It was 3 things on that flow diagram.
Yes, work harder, or you add equipment, add people, and add working hours.
Yeah,
basically that.
Yeah, and you have no way out of that trap unless management sanctions. Management has enough enlightenment. We talk about in Kaizen, you have to do these constraints, so you force people to think differently. The problem is we don't have a forcing function like that to make management think differently. We don't have that. I've tried to illuminate that with the books I write about classical management and stuff like that. But ultimately, they're in charge, and you don't have the forcing function. In Mr. Iwata's slides, he talked about autonomous activities. You don't get permission for Kaizen and so forth. Just do it, etc. But you have to have management say that's okay. You understand the basic requirements of cost reduction, make work simpler, shorten lead time, etc. So you do Kaizen with that in mind.
I think that more often than not, the biggest constraint comes from the fact that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the time or everything.
Yeah.
Even if the management is kind of okay-ish with trying out different things to work better and faster and produce higher quality, more often than not, the client is the one that wants everything being done in the shortest amount of time with the highest quality, and they usually change their minds in the middle of the process of producing whatever. This creates a whole lot more workload because we don't have adequate change management, because we don't have
Yeah.
in software development, and this creates a lot of inventory, which in IT is called technical debt.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how do we deal with this constraint if management, let's say that management is okay, but the client says, I want all of this in 2 months. I don't care if it will take 4 months to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a situation, it's everywhere, where management doesn't realize that you don't have resource problems, you have waste problems. You have more resources than you need, but you don't understand that because you have so much waste. So that's why they always think they need to hire more people. That's why they think that so-and-so's a top performer and another person's a bad performer. And so let's get rid of the bad one and hire a new one and hope they're like the other guy or lady who's a big top performer and so forth. It's all driven by waste. And so what some people do is they, secretly drop on the boss's desk an article, when they're away on travel about, you know, Kaizen or waste or process improvement. So maybe the boss will read it and get the idea without having to confront the boss and tell him, you're behind the times, you run the business like it's 1920, you know, not the 2024. You're a century behind in how you run the business. That's a difficult thing to say to a boss straight to their face, whether it's your immediate supervisor or the CEO. So you find some other way to do it that you don't get in so much trouble. It's not easy.
Saying it,
This is the first.
It's
This
kinda
is
you have to do Kaizen so you can have time to make more Kaizen.
yes, I agree with that, Bruno. Thank you. And Bob, it's from my experience, it's really not that hard saying this to the manager or the CEO or whoever. What is hard is facing the consequences.
oh right, yeah. I agree with you. It's not hard to say it, but facing the consequences is difficult. But this was. I just want to show you. This was the. Oops, it's not it.
And thank you very much for your time, for your answer.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, we have it's a bad situation, it's just not, oops, it's just not, yeah, not a good situation. This is just what we have to face. It's our reality. Um, let's see if this is it here. Yeah, you know, the, in Lean World, the Gemba walk now is something very, looks like this on the left-hand side. And, what Ono basically had a goal of, I want this, create this river system. I want just in time. I want flow. So he would scold people, why are you doing something so stupid? It's batch and queue, it's caught delays and rework, whatever it is, direction he gives, do it in half the time and I'll be back in 2 weeks. So, this is simple.
It's kind of respectful in some way because it shows he is trusting on your thinking and your expertise to do something. It's kind of aggressive by today's standards, but its background has a very, very big, it's a very, very big demonstration of respect. I hired you so you can think, you can do your best, so you can be your best and show your art, show
Right.
your work for me.
Yep. And it's very clear.
No ambiguity.
It's no ambiguity. Right. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes there's ambiguity because he would say, why are you doing something so stupid? And people wouldn't understand it, but they had to think to understand it. So anyway, maybe we should spend just a moment here. We're almost done talking about the last piece, Kaizen, respect for humanity. So of course, when you do Kaizen, you eliminate waste, and it's just not wasted labor and so forth, but you're not spending so much electricity, you're not spending so much, putting so much stuff in the landfill, you're not using so much water, you're not creating so much CO2, so there's many positive effects of this when you do Kaizen. And that's how, this respects humanity. TPS is a great way to deal, of course, with climate change, have industrial growth without having, one for one increases in consumption of energy and water and so forth.
And by the way, Lean
yeah.
is realizing just now that is very
Yeah.
it's very profitable to sell Lean as the pathway to green. So you guys are going to see people talking about this very much, but again, leaving Kaizen out of the context.
Yeah.
Nothing will change.
Yeah, you're just going to somehow 5S your way to greenness or something. It doesn't make any sense. And well, obviously we've beat up on Lean a lot in this today in relationship to Kaizen, and it's just a joke. So anyway, did you have any comments before we go?
I believe Colleen has.
Oh, yes, Colleen.
I have another question. I think I can spend a lot of time with Bob and Bruno, especially just asking questions and nodding. However, in my search for the truth, it wasn't just Kaizen that brought my attention. There were also the applications, of course, of something that is very trendy at the moment, which is machine learning. But recently, in recent years, meaning within the past 5 years, there has been a new idea, let's call it, or an initiative of combining machine learning for prediction with operations research, which is practically linear algebra is 100 years old approach for optimizing operations. I find the combination of machine learning with operations research a lot more sensible than Six Sigma. I hope nobody will hate me for saying this. The reason although I am a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt candidate and I'm preparing for a certification test, in my search, I find that Lean Six Sigma should be a system, and there is no system there. It's chaos.
Right.
There is no system there. So I'm looking for alternatives, and I just wanted to have your take on the combination of classical TPS Kaizen with machine learning and operations research for optimization of resources and operations in general. Thank you.
Well, I don't know much about it. My quick comment will be machine learning is, I guess, operating more with data, and humans have what is it, 5 or 6 senses, whatever it is, and the machine has I don't know, 0 senses, I suppose. And so I imagine the machine learning and so forth will be helpful, but it will also, when it comes to improvement, require some human sensory perception engagement of that.
Yeah, the direction that I was leaning into is that in machine learning, the machine learns, and the goal of Kaizen is for the person to learn. So this is why I wanted your take on it, because I think they are like complete opposites.
Well, I mean, context matters and sensory perceptions matter. So to the extent that the machine has those or does not have those is going to be important.
Well, I think with another recent technological approach to managing operations, which is business process intelligence and process mining, where you can see actually how your processes work, what the process of creating flow actually does. And you have all of this data. Sure, you can push it into an ML model, and you can use some linear algebra to optimize it. But generally, the hardest thing, in my experience, to do is to get people to admit exactly how they are doing their work. They usually say, we do this, we do this, we do this because the manager said so. But in reality, they're doing it in a whole different way. Of course, there is the culture of fear in classical management that is to blame for this. But if we have this much insight with a whole lot of data points, with a lot of data coming from process mining, I suppose we can push it into an ML model just to see how things are expected to be in the next 3, 6, 5 months, 3, 6, or 9 months, and take precautions for this.
Well, with Kaizen, it's to understand the work, how the work is performed. That's why you have a standard work combination sheet is based on observation. It's either direct observation or you videotape it and create this standard work combination sheet based upon that. And so you're right, in office work, people are not very willing to say what they do, but to be able to videotape it and understand really what they're doing, you have to do that in a correct way so they don't rebel or feel an invasion of privacy or so forth. I don't know where this stuff will go. It'll be very interesting because if we rely on too much on machines to tell us what version of reality do you want to believe in? And companies like Boeing get in trouble all the time because their version of reality is the numbers and dashboards and things like that, and not understanding what's going on in the real world, in the shop and office. And that's what determines whether 346 people live or die. And in this case, they died. Because the reality that management has is metaphysical. It's numbers. It's not the actual reality that the shop and office floor. And they don't want to learn this lesson. The desire for status precludes wanting to know what's going on the ground floor.
It's kind of the map will never be the territory. There are some details that real life can show us.
Yeah, the management always makes the mistake of making commitments without having some degree of certainty that it can actually be done. It's like when Boeing outsourced everything for the 787, they're like, they've never done that before, but let's do it now. And of course, we're going to assume success because what else? We're Boeing, so it's got to be successful. It was a huge disaster. It's just they're living in a that's the whole. That's why Toyota leaders go to the Genba and they spend time doing Kaizen, even if it's the president of Toyota, to get in touch with the real world, not get out of the metaphysical world that they're in, which is the imagination of how things are happening based on numbers and graphs and spreadsheets and so forth, to the real world of what's actually going on. And if you can't get leaders to do that, then they're always going to be in the metaphysical world and always put the company at risk. So where this machine learning and AI and all this stuff goes, it's a black box. People tend to love black boxes. Here's my black box. I don't know what goes on inside of this thing. I don't care to know it, and I just assume whatever answer comes from it is true. And that's how companies are going to be led, will have been led in the past, and will be led in the future. And a lot of people will suffer for that. There's the possibility that it ends up creating a better, more respectful leadership. I don't discount that as a possibility from happening. I think from a historical perspective, it is unlikely, but you cannot say never. Anyway, we have to wrap this up. Colleen, do you want just closing comments? Anybody? Bruno, do you have anything you'd like to say? We do have one more of these in next month.
I think we are getting better at each meeting. So I'm very happy. Very, very
Good.
happy. Just
Okay.
want to
Well,
say that.
thank you again for joining.
I
Thank you,
think
guys.
it's a regular thing, and just forcing people to think, as the John says.
Yeah. Yeah, but that point about forcing people, people need to think a lot more about that. Because if the reason why there are laws in a country is to force people to do things, right? The reason why you have traffic signals in the road is to force people to do things. So think about that. What does it mean to
That's deep.
force? Yeah. And how do you do it in a way that people will say, okay, I'll try it, you know? So, okay. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the weekend and hopefully we'll see you next month.
Always a
Thank you very
pleasure.
much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.